Hello and welcome back to Happier Ever After. Today we're talking about loneliness, but not the kind that's easily explained, not the kind that's solved by company or distraction, and not the kind that necessarily disappears when other people are around. This episode is about the loneliness that follows the death of a partner, the kind that exists even in a room full of people. If you're listening and you've ever thought, why do I feel so lonely when I'm not actually alone? This episode is for you. Loneliness after the death of a partner is often misunderstood both by others and by the person experiencing it. From the outside, it can look confusing. People may see you going to work, meeting friends, parenting, functioning. They may assume that because you're not isolated, you must be okay. But inside, there can be a very different experience, a quiet, persistent sense of being alone in a way that you never were before. And that can be deeply unsettling. One of the reasons this kind of loneliness feels so painful is because it's not just about missing company, it's about missing your person, the one who shared your everyday life, the one who witnessed the small moments, not just the big ones, the one who knew your moods, your history, your shorthand, your explanation. When you lose a partner, you lose the person who held a particular place in your life that no one else can step into. And that absence can echo everywhere. You might notice it in the evenings, in bed at night, in moments where you instinctively turn to say something and then remember all over again. You might notice it when something good happens and there's no one to share it with in the same way, or when something difficult happens and there's no one who knows exactly what that means for you. That's not failure of your friendships or your support network. It's the reality of losing a primary attachment, your loved one. I want to name something here because it truly matters. The kind of loneliness is not the same as being single, and it's not the same as feeling socially isolated. It's the loneliness of losing shared life, shared history, shared identity, shared meaning. There are stories that only the two of you held, memories that don't quite land the same when someone else is told about them, jokes that don't need context, silences that were comfortable. When that's gone, it can feel like part of your inner world has nowhere to go. And that can leave you feeling as though you're carrying something alone. People will care deeply about you, but it can still feel very lonely. I know this space well. I know what it's like to be surrounded by people and still feel profoundly lonely. To be listened to, supported, included, and yet walk away from interactions feeling emptier rather than fuller. And if that's been your experience, I want you to hear this clearly. There is nothing wrong with you. This loneliness is not a sign that you're too dependent, too attached, or incapable of being on your own. It's a natural response to losing someone who mattered deeply. From a nervous system and attachment perspective, your partner was someone your system orientated to. They were a source of safety, regulation, familiarity, and emotional grounding. When that bond is suddenly gone, the system doesn't just grieve the person, it grieves the loss of that orientation point. That's why loneliness after the death of a partner can feel so visceral, so physical, so hard to explain. And that's also why well meaning advice often misses the mark. Get out more, keep busy, don't be on your own too much. Those suggestions assume that loneliness is about the absence of people. This isn't that. Sometimes being around others can actually intensify this loneliness because it highlights what and who is missing. You may find that socializing feels effortful, that conversations feel shallow or draining. You're present, but you're not quite there. And then comes the self questioning. Why am I like this? Why can't I just enjoy being with people anymore? What's wrong with me? And again, I want to slow this down. What you're experiencing is not a personal failing, it's grief, another layer of loneliness that can show up after the death of a partner is the loss of being deeply known. When you're in a long term partnership, someone knows the context of your life. They know where you've come from, what you've been through, how you think, how you react. When that person dies, there can be a sudden sense that no one else holds that full picture anymore. You might find yourself having to explain things that once didn't need words, or feeling tired at the thought of being fully seen again. It can create a sense of emotional isolation, even in close relationships. And then there's the quieter, more disorientating layer of this loneliness, the loss of who you were in that relationship. Because when you lose a partner, you don't just lose them, you lose a version of yourself that existed with them. The we, the roles you played, the way you moved through the world together. That can leave you feeling unfamiliar to yourself, as though you don't quite know where you fit anymore, socially, emotionally, even practically. This can show up as feeling out of place in conversations, not knowing how to introduce yourself, feeling like you don't quite belong anywhere in the same way. A sense that your identity has been taken. This isn't you losing confidence, it's you navigating an identity shift. And once again, there is no right or wrong way to experience this. Some people crave connection quickly, others need long periods of solitude. Some move back and forth between the two. Your way is allowed to be your way. I want to gently say something else here because it's really important. Loneliness doesn't mean you're meant to fill the gap immediately. It doesn't mean you should rush into new relationships, friendships, or versions of yourself before you're ready. Loneliness is information, not instruction. It tells you that something meaningful has been lost, and that deserves care, not correction. There can be a lot of pressure, internal and external, to do something about loneliness, to fix it, to make it go away. But often, what helps most is allowing it to exist without turning it into a judgment about yourself. If you're listening and noticing an ache in your body, a heaviness in your chest, or a wave of sadness, pause for a moment. You don't need to analyze it. You don't need to make it better. Just acknowledge it. This is love, still present. Over time, and I mean over time, new forms of connection can grow, not as replacements, but as additions, different, changed, sometimes quieter, sometimes surprising. But that growth doesn't happen by forcing yourself to be fine. It happens by letting this loneliness be what it is, without making it mean that you are broken or behind. Life after loss asks us to learn how to be with ourselves in new ways, to tolerate spaces that feel uncomfortable, to trust that connection can look different without erasing what mattered. And that is not easy work. If you're here listening to this, you're already doing something deeply important, even if it doesn't feel like it. If you'd like additional support as you navigate life after loss, you can explore the Life After Loss guide via the show notes, or check out the Happier Ever After hub at happiercoach.com, happier-ever-after, where resources will continue to be added throughout this series. You don't need to rush connection. You don't need to replace what was lost. You don't need to explain your grief. You are responding to love, and that makes complete sense. Thank you for being here with me today. I'll be with you again in the next episode. Until then.